This video is an introduction to the Incarnation cycle with a particular emphasis on Advent. Let's start by settling ourselves down wherever you are to do a meditative exercise to introduce this particular cycle so that you can get a feel for what the cycle of Advent, Christmas, and Epiphany are trying to reveal to us symbolically. Wherever you are seated now, close your eyes and imagine that you have woken up in an unknown open space. The sky above you is moonless, but is radiant with the canopy of stars. The Milky Way is so vivid that you feel you can almost touch it. Yet, besides the light of the stars, all is dark around you, and you cannot make out exactly where you are. You realize that you do not have a watch, and your ability to estimate the time will be completely reliant on the rising of the sun. The darkness is disconcerting, but you marvel at the wonder and beauty of the stars. One star is brighter than the others. You admire it and wonder if it is the morning star, a sign of the coming dawn. Time passes and you sense that you are colder than you were before. A distant memory awakens, a saying that you learned long ago. The night is coldest just before the dawn. Indeed, as you shiver quietly, the horizon begins to lighten, and gradually the stars begin to disappear. The blackness of the sky is changing, but the bright star continues to sparkle, a herald of impending day. What began as a gradual lightening picks up pace rapidly, and as the sky becomes ever brighter, you are able to make out topographical lying of the land. The trees and the grass become discernible, and you realize that you are not alone. There are others around, gazing at the dawning sky, the expectancy evident in their faces. All of you are facing the east, where the rays of the sun are beginning to dazzle the particles of air around the horizon, changing the color from bright blue to bright orange, and then bright yellow. One of the other people not far from you yells to you excitedly, "The sun is about to rise. A new day is dawning. I was struggling to work out where I was, but now I am able to see." You smile and join the other people who are beginning to congregate in small groups. Just then, the sun bursts over the horizon, and the colors all around you begin to reveal a place full of life and energy. The temperature is rising, and the morning star has disappeared. But the sun, in all its glory, is rising fast. Its light is so strong you have to turn away, but you feel the warmth of it on your back. And as you gaze to the west, the shadows of night begin to disappear. The sky is blue. The day is clear. The brightness of the sun has fulfilled your hope and given you energy to find your way. You realize that without the sun, the hope of day would not exist, and that without its magnificence, your own life would be very different. That short meditation is an image of the seasons of Advent and of Christmas and of Epiphany. All of them are reliant on the image of light. In Advent, light in the darkness. At Christmas, the emergence of the beautiful light. And Epiphany, the full radiance of the light. So the seasons of carnation, or the cycle of incarnation, is about a series of seasons of light. Advent is a season which is about the dawn approaching, and you will find that many of the readings speak about the dawn from on high, the morning star, or the arrival of the Redeemer. In other words, the morning star, or the gradual brightening of the sky, is a sign of things to come. Christmas is the breaking of dawn. You will probably be familiar with the Malachi reading from Malachi 4. The Son of Righteousness has risen with healing in his wings. And then Epiphany is where we consider the light shining in the world, Jesus revealed as a divine being, and how that shining manifests in Jesus's humanity. You may ask yourself a question, particularly for those of you who are in the Southern Hemisphere and where I am. Why are the seasons of light at this particular time of a year? Here in Durban, where I am recording this video, the sun shines late into the evening. The days are warm and sunny. In the Northern Hemisphere, in comparison, we are approaching the winter solstice, where the longest night is on the 21st of December. Here, the longest day is on the 21st of December. But if you think for a while that Christianity as a religion first found its feet in the Middle East and is primarily an Eastern religion which spread into the West, but in the Northern Hemisphere, then perhaps some of the symbolism which is embedded in Advent, Christmas, and Epiphany will become clearer to you. Both Christmas and Epiphany seem to be originally linked with the winter solstice. We'll talk more about that in another video, because we are concentrating here mostly on Advent. But to say that the date, the 25th of December, is very close to the actual winter solstice, which is on the 21st. But apparently, ancient seers began to discern that the nights were getting shorter from the 25th of December. You may find it interesting too, that Christmas was probably placed around that time because it was signifying a gradual increasing of light, tangibly increasing of light. Here, of course, in the Southern Hemisphere, it's completely the opposite. But you can see how important it would be that if on the 25th of December you could see more and more light appearing during the day, you were equating that with Jesus coming into the world and shining even more light around you and within you. Just as a point of interest, some of you may have wondered why John the Baptist's feast day is the 25th of June, 6 months later than Christmas. And the reason is this: we are told in Scripture that John the Baptist considered himself a lesser light, one whose role was simply to show the way to the greater light. And so because the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere is on the 21st of June, and then the days begin to get progressively shorter, you have this dichotomy on both sides of the year. On the 25th of December, the light is beginning to increase. On the 25th of June, the light is beginning to decrease. So the light is decreasing for John the Baptist, but the light is increasing for Jesus Christ. Of course, the symbolism, because it's embedded in the Northern Hemisphere, has a great sense of beauty for those who live in the Northern Hemisphere. They can discernibly see the light in the darkness, or the increasing light within the darkness. For those of us who live in the Southern Hemisphere, we are surrounded at this time of the year by radiant, warm light. For us, we have a greater sense of Epiphany at this time of the year, and the radiance of Christ's glory. but it's more difficult to feel for example, the imagery of John chapter 1, where there is a light in the darkness and the darkness not comprehending it. That is not to say that we can't enjoy the symbolism, but that it's a little bit more difficult to conjure for us. So what is the general structure of the cycle of incarnation? There are 3 seasons: Advent, Christmas, and Epiphany. Christmas Day is at the apex of, or the middle of, this cycle. It's like a pivot point. Everything pivots around it. So we start with Advent Sunday. It's a movable feast because it is always 4 weeks, 4 Sundays before Christmas. And because Christmas is a set day and is on a different day of the week every year, Advent can begin as early as the 27th of November, as it is this year. We're now in 2022, and this is the earliest that Advent can be this year because Christmas is on a Sunday this year. So the full length from Advent Sunday this year to Christmas is just under 5 weeks, but it can be as little as 4 weeks. When Christmas is on a Monday, Advent 4, the 4th Sunday of Advent, is just the day before. So Advent Sunday, the first Sunday of Advent, is movable. It can be very early in late November, or it can be quite late in the first week of December. The season of Christmas follows Christmas Day for 12 days, and you'll probably be familiar with that very famous carol, The 12 Days of Christmas. The words for that, of course, seem a little bit ridiculous to us now, and there's some conjecture about whether it has political significance or if it has other meaning. That's not particularly of a concern to us here, but simply to say that it is 12 days in all. It's a large celebration that can last for a very long time so that we can enjoy ourselves fully. Those of you who are diehard legalists would probably want to argue that we should only be singing Christmas carols during the season of Christmas, and that is from Christmas Day through to 12th night. That's the 5th of January. I even know of some people here in South Africa, not recently, but about 40 or 50 years ago, who would only have their 9 lessons and carol services set just after Christmas or in those 12 days. And you'll also know that, for example, the 9 lessons and carols from King's College, Cambridge, only takes place on Christmas Eve. So usually the Christmas carols are kept for the Christmas season. There are, of course, very beautiful carols for Advent, which are seldom sung in this day and age when you hear Christmas carols being played in shops all the way from mid-November. But suffice to say, there are beautiful pieces of music specifically for Advent and the well-known Christmas carols for the season of Christmas. Epiphany is a day and also a season. You have the day of Epiphany, which is on the 6th of January. That's after the 12 days of Christmas. In the Eastern Church, Epiphany has a much richer symbolism than it does in the West. But we can speak about that at a later stage because there is significant beauty for us as well. Epiphany is a season of 40 days. And in fact, it really includes, those 40 days include the 12 days of Christmas. If you consider that, or if we calculate Christ's birth as the 25th of December, 40 days after that, he was taken to the temple to be presented at the temple as was custom at that time. And that is Candlemas, which is always on the 2nd of February. Candlemas is the conclusion or the official conclusion of the season of Epiphany. And that's the celebration which usually includes some kind of recitation or singing of the Song of Simeon. That's that beautiful canticle which is related to Simeon in the temple. And he's saying that Christ was going to be the light to the Gentiles. So the Sundays of Epiphany after Candlemas continue with the same themes of Epiphany. Mostly they are about Jesus being revealed as a divine human, And that's usually through the miracles that he worked. Sometimes, for example, in that season, you would have the biblical stories of the gospel stories of the feeding of the 5,000 or the raising of Lazarus and so on. Usually that greater season ends with the Sunday of the Transfiguration, which is just before Lent starts. Now, Christmas, as I said before, is the culmination of Advent, and it is also the beginning of the season of Christmas. So it's a pivot. It's really the fulcrum of the cycle of incarnation, although Epiphany, the day of Epiphany, is also a bit like a fulcrum. Both Christmas Day and Epiphany Day are incredibly important liturgical celebrations. Now let's turn our attention to the season of Advent, and that's what this video is really about. There are a number of themes in Advent, but the three most common are light in the darkness. And related to that, because light in the darkness gives us a sense of hope, hope is another important theme. And also because the morning star signals the rising sun, Jesus' second coming is also often included in the themes of Advent. There's a very special Greek term which is used to describe Christ's second coming. It's a theological term called parousia. So sometimes theologians and liturgists speak about Christ's parousia. So we've got three main themes. There are other lesser themes, but these are the ones that come out most strongly in the lectionary. There are different colors for Advent. The most dominant color in most denominations is purple for this time of the year. Some denominations add a second color, rose, or what we would normally call pink. It's really a brightish kind of pink. And that's the third Sunday of Advent, sometimes called Gaudete Sunday. Gaudete is Latin, it means rejoice. And it comes from an ancient tradition in the church that in the older lectionaries on the third Sunday of Advent, that reading from Philippians, which starts, rejoice in the Lord always, again I say rejoice, was always set. And even in the modern lectionaries and one of the years, that reading appears. And some kind of reading about rejoicing is usually put on the third Sunday of Advent. So it's retained that idea of rejoicing. And in recent years, in the last 2 or 3 decades, the idea of using rose, the color of rose on the third Sunday of Advent to denote this kind of rejoicing and lightening of austerities has been used. In some denominations, the color for Advent is purple, and I mean in blue. And they use blue so as to distinguish Advent from Lent. Many people equate the liturgical color purple with a sense of fasting and almsgiving and penitence. Some denominations have wanted to have a different focus on Advent, and so they've changed the color to blue. And that's it's beautiful in itself because it sets Advent aside as something quite different from Lent. If you continue to watch these videos over a period of time, you'll see that Advent and Lent have many similarities and may even have had a very similar historical birth process, because they're quite similar in length. But in the modern calendar, or the modern liturgical calendar, the two seasons have different focuses and different themes. So it may be expedient to use blue if you are in a liturgical setting. So let's look at those three themes one by one. The first being light in the darkness. In that meditation that I started with at the beginning of this video, I used the image of the bright morning star. And that image comes in both the Old Testament and the New Testament as a symbol of hope, a symbol of things to come. In the book of Revelation, the bright morning star is used as a picture of Christ, a sign of God's hope. You'll see there, I have put the Malachi 4, the Son of Righteousness will come with healing in his wings. So there's this idea in the Old Testament that the rising sun is very much a picture of light overcoming the darkness. Darkness, in this sense, being an image of uncertainty, of chaos even, because we are not able to see so clearly in the dark. You may need to think carefully about this. In our day and age, with electric light and so on, it is difficult to conceive of how dark the darkness really can be. You need to try and imagine yourself in a rural area where there aren't street lights and so on, to get a real feeling of what darkness is like for the people who put the liturgical calendar together. For them, night was a very difficult time because there was the uncertainty of no particular strong light. Yes, you could have little lamps, little candles, and so on. They didn't throw a very strong light. It's only in our modern era that we've been able to have electric light, which has made life in the dark much easier to handle. So the idea of darkness as being an uncertain time, a time of fear, of not being able to see clearly, then you can imagine for such people at such times, when the sun comes, when the light comes, when the full radiance of day comes, it's so much easier to function and to work and to see. So the idea of the sun of righteousness coming is something showing us that the sun is dispelling anything of uncertainty, of fear, of not knowing where the future lies, and so on. The word healing, of course, it comes from, in the Hebrew, from the word shalom, a sense of wholeness, of fullness. Of course, there is no English word that really embodies shalom fully, but those of you who have heard this word before and are familiar with it will know that it brings a full sense of contentedness, of peace, of joy. And so that kind of fullness of being within Christ is what is being denoted by Malachi. The theme, of course, as I've been saying, is a duality of light and darkness, where light is representing hope, warmth, understanding, and so on, and darkness, the opposite of that. Now, an Advent wreath is a portrayal of that duality of light and darkness. Yes, it's very quaint to light one candle for every Sunday of Advent. But the actual symbolism behind this is that in each successive week, the light is gathering in intensity. First one candle, then 2, it's getting brighter. Then 3, it's getting even brighter. Then 4, it's really bright around the Advent wreath. If you've ever lit an Advent wreath in a dark room, you'll get the full impact of that, because as you light the successive candles, it becomes brighter and brighter. And so the darkness disperses, very much reminiscent, as I said before, of the John chapter 1. So the Advent wreath is a picture of that gathering light within the darkness. If you're lighting the candles during the day, that is lost, of course. But if you light it at night, you'll see that gathering light. The other important thing, which is sometimes lost in Advent, but is a very important part of it, and which features almost always on the first Sunday of Advent, is that the light of Christ, the light of God, is like a searching light, like a torch. If you're in a dark place and you switch on a torch, you can search for things that you're looking for. And a searchlight, in this sense, is the searchlight of God's judgment, looking at our hearts. Often our hearts are characterized in the biblical sense as dark places. And as the light comes into that darkness, it reveals all that is there. For some of us, that's a very scary moment, of course. But the reality is that God is aware of our darkness and aware of our faults and our sin. And the light, when the light shines on those dark patches, is able to bring that healing, that shalom. So that's the first theme, light in the darkness. very much connected to that, of course, is what I was speaking about, hope. And Richard Rohr has written quite a lot about Advent, but I've just taken this one quote of his about hope and the kind of hope that is embodied in the season of Advent. The theological virtue of hope is the patient and trustful willingness to live without closure, without resolution, and still be content and even happy, because our satisfaction is now at another level and our source is beyond ourselves. For many of us, that kind of hope is very difficult to live with. We want to find closure in aspects of our lives. We want resolution. And sometimes we base our contentment on that resolution or on that closure. In this sense, in the sense that Rohr is painting for us, we get the idea that our life in Christ and our ministry in the world is not something that is going to be complete in our lifetime. There will not be a full closure to the work that we might begin in our ministry, in our work as Christians. And I'm not speaking only about ordained people, but all of us have a ministry to fulfill in the world. And we may be called to join a ministry that is in progress or to start a new ministry. But it's very unlikely that we will see the full conclusion of that. I'm often, when I'm talking about this kind of thing, reminded of those who during the time of apartheid here in South Africa worked tirelessly against apartheid, but died before apartheid fell. They didn't see the transition into freedom. And that's the kind of hope that Rohr is talking about. It's the kind of hope that continues to work for freedom, even if that freedom hasn't arrived by the time that you are called to heaven. And yes, that's a very difficult part of our lives. For those of us who are living in South Africa at this point, there is a great sense of hopelessness in our politics, in all sorts of spheres of South Africa's life. For us, this sense of hope is very important at the moment. Christian hope brings us through seasons of hopelessness when we realize that our hope is not in politicians or not in political systems or things like that. But our hope is in a far greater power, the power of Christ, the power of God that sees us through these uncertain times and helps us to come through to the other side, even if we don't see closure or resolution. And then, of course, a very dominant theme is the coming of Christ. And there is an interesting take on the coming of Christ, because it can have three different meanings, two of which will become clear very quickly now as I speak about the word Maranatha. It's an Aramaic word, Maranatha, which was transliterated into Greek, but it can be interpreted in two ways. The first is as Maranatha, which in Aramaic means, Lord, come. So we are using it as a command, Lord, come now. The second is as Maranatha, our Lord has come. That is in the past. And this is often used as a creedal statement. And then for those of you who are familiar with something that was drawn into the Western Eucharistic canon some years back, but wasn't part of it before, it's from the Eastern Church, is a little statement that many people now use in the Eucharistic prayer. Christ has come, Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. When I was a boy, a little boy, I often used to wonder why the second line of that was Christ is come. I always used to think that was a grammatical error, that it should have been Christ has come in the past or has risen. But if we think about it grammatically, it's quite true. Christ died, that was a past event. Christ is risen, that's something that's happening now, not only in the past, but now, and Christ will come again. And that's kind of what is important about the coming of Christ. Christ did come as a human being in the past. Christ is coming in this present moment right now. Christ comes to us in the very present of our nature and of our being. And Christ will come again at the end of the age. So Christ is the Lord of time, of the past, of the present, and of the future. So when we say Christ has come into time, Christ came as a child and as a human being at a particular time in human history. But Christ comes to us through the Holy Spirit very tangibly in the present. And Christ will come on the clouds as this in the second coming. So that is part of our understanding of Advent. All of these things point to another image, that is waiting. And in that meditation that I did at the beginning of this video, we were waiting for the dawn to come, an expectation of the coming dawn. That comes through very strongly in Advent, particularly in the gospel readings, but in also all through the Old Testament as well. So, for example, there's that story in Matthew. Keep watch because you don't know when the master is coming. Then also the idea that comes through very beautifully in the Old Testament about waiting quietly, waiting patiently for the Lord. You can have a look at these quotes from the Old Testament, Lamentations 3, Psalm 130, Psalm 131, and Zephaniah 1, which all speak about being in the presence of God, quietly listening, waiting upon God. And while we are waiting, we are holding the past, the present, and the future in tension, because we might be looking to see what has happened in the past. We are very much present in the moment, and we might be using this moment of listening and waiting quietly to discern for the future. And as Richard Raw was pointing out, that we may be waiting patiently even without the fulfillment of that hope ever coming to fruition. So that gives you, in a nutshell, an introduction to Advent and what its themes are and what it's trying to accomplish in the 4 weeks that lead up to Christmas. It's not just preparation for Christmas Day, but preparation for our lives as Christians and our ministry in the world today. God bless and enjoy this Advent.